What's up, everybody? Hey, we are doing something super special today and even a little bit new. If you are new here, my name is Pastor Nate, and I am the youth pastor here at Media City Youth. And today, guys, we are doing something we like to call, it's a new thing, the Last Supper. We're going to get into what that means, but hey, this is a conversation where we're going to be asking some questions and getting some really cool answers, and it's not a conversation that I'll be having by myself because today I have a very special guest with me, and you know her, you love her. It is Nellie Nous. Come on, Nellie.
What's up? Glad to be here.
Glad to have you.
Yeah,
this
I'm
is new.
excited.
This is exciting.
Yeah.
We've never done this before.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The Last Supper.
Come
on, if you don't have the opportunity or if you don't know who Nellie is, let me tell you who Nellie is. I wrote this down because there's a lot of things that you do, and so let me give it to you. Nellie Nous, leader extraordinaire, full-time college student. When do you finish school?
6 months next.
Home stretch.
One more semester. Yeah, I got
Home
senioritis
stretch.
for sure.
I get that. Social media director at your university, which is pretty crazy. You do all of our graphics here at MCY. You're also, because of that, a graphic designer, a powerhouse preacher, a fashion designer. You started your own business.
Yeah, just a little bit.
The heck? Failed comedian.
Failed.
Someone slipped that one in there. I don't know who.
Nate, I think that's your bio slipping in.
Your Instagram bio says aspiring NBA wife.
Oh, 100%.
Have you met any NBA players?
No.
How is that going for you?
You know, I'm on a journey.
Okay. Is it the start of the journey?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, a lot of the ones that I'd prefer to be with are taken, you know. Stephen Curry
I understand that.
as one of them.
Okay.
But just to be an NBA
I don't think our
wife,
students really know about sports.
I think our students know about sports.
Okay.
I think so. I think they know
Anyway.
who the Currys are.
Continuing, you are a phenomenal friend and a phenomenal human being. So,
Thank you.
again, thank you for being here. The Last Supper. This idea came from a conversation that you and I had like last week.
Yeah.
And basically, kind of like if you think about the Last Supper, it's Jesus with his disciples before he's going to get crucified. Side note, we're not dying. No one's getting crucified here, which thank the Lord.
Thank God.
But it's kind of like an interesting thought that the Bible records things that were said when they were all together. But like, what were the things that Jesus said that like weren't recorded? Like this one of the last times he's going to see them like in the flesh. Like what were like the nuggets of wisdoms, the thing that, hey, like this is how I look at things. This is what I do. I imagine it's probably some pretty cool conversation. I'm sure to like Peter, he's like, hey, do you want to know how I did like the walking on water trick? Like I can show, like they probably learned all of his tips and tricks.
Probably.
But it's probably a good time. And also because the idea also kind of came out of an opportunity for us to hear from you before you step into something really exciting that God's going to do. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the next opportunity God has for you?
Yeah. It's crazy because like growing up, I never thought like being a creative director or a graphic designer was ever going to be a part of my future. But I actually am moving in like 3 weeks. Just got my apartment. I'm so excited. I'm moving in 3 weeks to Modesto, California. There's a lot of cows there, but I love cows. I want a pet cow one day.
What?
Like my dream is to have a modern home with a cow in the backyard.
Okay.
And I want my kids to just raise the cow like a dog. And I want my cow to do tricks. And it's just a dream of mine.
Do cows do tricks?
They can. I've
right.
seen one hop like a hoop thing.
Oh, okay.
And that's going to be my cow one day.
All right.
But yeah, I have the honor and privilege of, I'm going to be the creative director at the
you
House
are.
Modesto. That's where my brother and my sister-in-law are the youth and young adult pastors. So I'm super excited because, you know, doing ministry with family, like that's crazy. You know, it's just so awesome. So yeah, I'm moving in a couple weeks. Just got the keys to my apartment. Crazy stuff.
You're moving for such a good reason.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of our students might not know that you are moving, and so now they do know. And we've had conversations, like I'll be on a conversation with you and I'll start crying because we're so sad that you're going. But at the same time, we're so happy and excited because God always has more. God always has the next step for you, and it's like just as a friend, like it's the coolest thing to see you step confidently and like out of obedience into the next thing that God has for you. So you're gonna kill it. You're gonna do such a good job. You have done so much for MCY. You have literally like changed the game here. So
Yeah, it's
well,
crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah, like I've spent like 2 years plus at MCY.
I
Like,
know.
from, like the first week I moved to LA, I was a part of MCY, and you know, if I didn't develop like the graphic design or anything like at MCY, would I even have the job? You know, it's just so crazy how
Wow.
like God uses every single opportunity to like
Right.
prepare you for something
Right.
that you never expected to even like use.
Wow.
Crazy.
That is insane.
Yeah.
That's so
I'm
cool.
gonna miss our students so much.
Oh man, they're gonna miss you. We're gonna
So
miss you.
much. Yeah.
But again, thank you for being here today. So hey, we're gonna
course.
jump right into this conversation.
Let's do it.
We want to know about Nellie and how you kind of think and how you kind of work. So if I were to describe you, Nellie, in 3 words, the first words that came to my mind were bold, creative, and influential. So let's start with bold. Would you view yourself as someone who is bold?
I would.
Okay.
I would, but I wouldn't. Oh, when I was younger, I probably would say no.
Okay.
I think with boldness, you need to be. For me personally, I need to be confident before I can be bold.
Yeah.
I feel like being bold, you kind of have to like be sure of yourself before you show yourself in
Okay.
a sense. So
That's
boldness, yeah, boldness. I think I am bold now. I think it takes time to like build a boldness because it's not only just being confident, it's kind of like acting on your confidence.
Right.
So yeah, I would say I'm pretty bold, depending on the context.
I agree. And I think you're so right. Like, I think some people can give off a level of confidence that maybe that is natural to them,
Yeah.
but there's still, you can be super confident, but in yourself maybe, but when you are bold, you are stepping out. You
Yeah.
are doing new things. You're stepping into new jobs. You're trying new things. And that is like so how I would describe you. So how about creative? Like, when would you view yourself as creative?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all creative.
Totally.
I think it's funny because like in our culture, like some people like put in a group like the creatives,
Right.
but I think every single person is creative. It's just different ways. Like
Right.
the way a single mother raises her kids, that's creative.
Right.
Like the way a gardener cuts the trees
Totally.
a certain way is creative. So yeah, I would think I'm creative in different types of things, you know?
So in the same way that you said you kind of stepped into your boldness, that it was like a progression, do you feel like you've stepped into your creativity, or was there a moment, was there something that happened in your life that you kind of like, all right, I'm just gonna go for it?
Yeah, I honestly think it's scary to be creative.
Yeah.
In the sense of boldness and creativity, like if I say I'm a creative person, I feel like sometimes there's a standard that we have to meet. How well can you graphic design? How well can you edit this video? How well can you draw?
Right.
And I feel like it's crazy because the way I even got into like creative stuff, like graphics and stuff, it was just my youth pastor and my mentor who was like, Nellie, can you do the Instagram stories for
Yeah.
this Sunday? And I was like, me?
Wow.
You want me to do it? Like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah. And I did it and I fell in love with it. And
So it wasn't even a passion.
it wasn't.
Interesting.
It literally wasn't a chosen passion.
Yeah.
Like I liked taking photos like normally.
Right.
Like I would, you know, when you're in like 8th grade and you think you're a photographer, like that was kind of me. Like I would take photos, but I didn't connect a passion with like a career until I realized it could be one.
Right.
Like I probably didn't hear the word creative director until I moved to like LA.
Right.
So it's crazy. I think with your personal creativity, it's really easy to compare.
Yeah.
But with boldness, you really can't. I
Right.
feel like boldness and comparison clash because if I'm trying to be bold in something, but I'm comparing myself, then am I really being bold?
Right.
So
That's so good.
yeah, I think it's really hard. I like what I've learned in like the podcasts I've listened to about creativity. It's like being creative is hard. Like
Right.
it's a hard, even though everybody is it, it's hard to find what yours is
Yeah.
without like compromising yourself in
Yeah.
a sense. So yeah.
So even how you say like, hey, everyone's creative, maybe the difference is not everyone views themselves as creative. So one of the things that even like myself that like I'm starting to do some graphic design stuff, I'm starting to step out into new creative ventures, if you will. And I've had to like put in work to actually viewing myself as creative. Because something that's stopped me for the longest time is thinking, well, I'm not creative. Like, I need someone else to do that. I need you to do
Yeah.
that. Like, and so one of the biggest changes I've tried is to change my perspective. Do you have any like tips or ways that you can kind of posture yourself to think about yourself creative. Because the mentality, the way you view yourself is everything, right?
Yeah. I think it's finding the root of your creativity in a sense. Like for me, when I started doing creative things, it was mostly for churches.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is interesting, but what is creativeness to me besides the church?
Right.
So with creative stuff, I really had to do my own type instead of just doing it for work purposes. I had to do it like for fun.
Right.
Which is so hard because like separating fun and work, it's like kind of weird, especially
Totally.
with creative stuff, because I think when making graphics becomes like a chore, you're like, oh, I think I'm missing the art of the art
Right.
in a sense.
That's
So
good.
yeah, I think channeling your creativeness,
Right.
your creativity, it takes finding your passions and not just like seeing what the greatest graphic designer's making.
Right.
It has to do with comparison a lot, I feel like.
Right.
Just finding your personal creativity instead of like basing it off our culture creativity. So yeah, I don't know.
Because I think, not that you compare other people, but it's helpful sometimes to look at what other people do.
100%,
Because you
yeah.
get inspired by that.
Yeah.
But if you're always just looking at someone else and what they're
Yeah.
doing, sometimes that stops you even from even trying,
Yeah.
you know?
I also think because the way that I learned, I did watch graphic design videos. I played around with Photoshop. I looked at other graphic designers, but I think there's this fear to not be original that stops a lot of people.
Right.
And I think when I look at somebody's graphic, I'm like, man, I wish I could make that. But the thing is, I could have
Right.
if it came to me. But that idea didn't come to me, it came to that person.
Right.
So I think there's just this fear that holds back a lot of people who are creative, but they're like, oh, somebody's done it already.
Right.
Or mine won't be original. Like, who cares?
Right.
Like, you know, just do it. And I struggled so much with originality. I'm like, you know, like if I use the same font as somebody, I'm like, no, Nellie, you can't.
Right.
And I'm like, no, what? Like, that's just such a corrupt view of creativity because
Right.
it's like, if it's innately in everybody, but it's not brought out, then it's like, okay, yeah, I'm original because I have creativity.
Right.
But the thing is, like, everybody has it. So I think some helpful tips is like, look at people's artwork, but don't try to like wish that you were them.
Right.
Like, just see what you can take from them. Like,
Right.
like there's going to be better graphic designers than us, you know? Like, it just depends on how much like work you put in and all this stuff, but like, what is better? Like, better graphic designer, you know? So
Right.
it's like, my friend Anna always says, like, why is it art only if you like it?
Right.
And I'm just like, that's the same with like graphic design and like everything that we do that's creative. Like, even back to like the gardener, like the way that a gardener like shapes a tree, I'm just like, how the heck does he do
It's
that?
like those animals you're like
Yeah,
seeing.
I'm like,
what?
I can't do that.
Right.
Like, you know, and I would consider him or her way more creative.
Totally.
But it's like, it's just a different thing, you know?
Yeah. And I think
So-
the crazy thing is like people who are super talented and are maybe making original things, they didn't just start by making,
Yeah.
like you always have to start somewhere. And then as you kind of go on that journey, after you know how to do a lot of what other people do, you can kind of
Yeah.
put your own spin on things. Because everyone can be creative, but everyone's an individual and unique.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think would you say it's like tapping into the unique way that God's made you, which allows you to be uniquely creative?
Yeah, for sure. I think I've always had this idea, like God's like shown me this idea time after time about like the different types of fonts. And this kind of has to do with like preaching and like just spreading the gospel. But like when I look at like different types of fonts, I see, okay, like let's say I type 5 sentences, all different fonts, but the same exact sentence. I'm spreading that same message, but it looks different. And I think everybody just, they speak in different fonts.
That's super cool.
They like share things in different fonts or different colors,
Right.
but it's the same message because the sentence doesn't change.
Yeah.
So I think with like people's originality, it's just like tapping into your creativity, but bringing what life you've brought into something.
Yeah.
Like the way I make a graphic, I might think of like a childhood memory that's completely different than the way that you would make a graphic. Like
Right.
we tap into different ideas, we tap into different experiences to create.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, yeah.
I love it.
That's what I think.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
So let's just jump down to that third word, influential. And when I was, first, how would you define influence? Because I think nowadays you have influencers.
Yeah.
I think there's a very different view of what influence means depending on kind of where you're at. So how would you define influence?
When I think about influence, like if I see somebody as an influencer, I'm like, okay, if they're doing something, I feel like and I want to do it, it's kind of like they have the capacity or the ability to kind of change my behavior or change the way I view things or change the way I communicate. I think influence is just having the ability to maybe change something about someone, bring out something in somebody, or unite a group of people.
I love that.
Sense.
So you said bring, and the reason I started thinking about you being influential is in my life, and kind of like we have conversations all the time just about like I have these ideas of being creative and like wanting to do stuff. Like I call you because when I think of you being influential, it's you've influenced me to be more creative. Like bring out the things that God has put inside of me that other people who maybe aren't influential don't bring that out of the people. If I went to them, that probably would have got stopped in me. But because I went to you, you brought it out of me. You know, like you pushed me into what God even has for me. And if it's creativity, or literally across the board, when you're influential, I think you said it, like you push people to change.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. What I've realized is to like look at healthy influencers in a sense, because it's just interesting because like when I moved to LA, like LA is known for like being artistic and free and like people wear whatever they want. And I'm from the Bay, so it's pretty similar. But I remember in high school, I feel like I was limited to my creativity because I wasn't around a lot of people who pushed for creativity. They didn't push for originality in a sense. It was kind of like, oh, go with the trends. But when I moved to LA, I was surrounded with people who were so okay with anything. They gave everything a chance. Like I always remember like conversations about Crocs. And like if I think about Crocs in the Bay, people hate Crocs. People hate Crocs, and then when it comes to like Air Force.
Do you have a pair of Crocs?
Of course.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, please. Crocs are phenomenal.
Okay.
Have you ever worn them?
I have not.
That's why.
I probably
Walking
won't.
on clouds.
Okay.
I'm in heaven when I'm wearing my Crocs.
All right.
Anyways, but it's like, it's just the different places I was in, I realized, like, it's just kind of different cultures. Like, even in the Bay, like, you're not supposed to crease your Air Forces. But in LA, some people think it's so cool to have that old creased look. And I think my creativity was brought out from the people around me.
Yeah, I love that. And like, it's funny, I went on your Instagram. It's where I got the NBA wife thing. You have your Spotify linked in your bio. And I'm like, who does that? But it's someone who lets every part of their life have the ability to like influence people. Like you started a business, a fashion thing. You started making clothing to kind of give a message, to express yourself. You took ownership of kind of your ideas. You let it come out in something you made, in graphics, in your music, in all this different stuff. And I'm like, how cool is that you can be influential in every part of your life? And I feel like that's something, would you say that you've like tapped into that you've like, how do you take ownership of the things that you've taken ownership of?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with getting over yourself and getting over your fears of not being original. Because at the end of the day, like, maybe you've never seen somebody put their Spotify whatever, but like I've seen people do it and I was inspired, I was influenced by it. And you know, I just think just getting over your fear of like not being perfect. Like I'm a perfectionist too. So it's like it's hard to be creative and a perfectionist. And also doing it as a job because in a sense people sometimes are criticizing your work, but it's really your art. So it's kind of a weird, you know, it's a line in between those two. But with ownership over it, I think it's kind of with the boldness and confidence that no matter what anybody says, you're still going to own it. And I think even in like the people I've been surrounded with, they really own their creativity and that inspired me. So I would say the main thing is just getting over your fears. Like just do it and see what happens. And like even so something that I recently did too was like, for example, for Instagram, I used to like keep the same filter for all my photos because I was so like adamant that I wanted my feed to look a certain way. But it really was just so people saw my Instagram and thought it was like clean and chic. And I was like, I'm not clean and chic. Like, I'm like colorful, and I'm like, I want to post whatever. And I was restricting myself from posting things because it didn't match the feed.
Right.
And I remember this past summer, I was like, you know what? The whole summer, I'm just going to go unedited. So this whole summer, I posted unedited stuff.
Wow.
And after that summer, I was like, I love this.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's so crazy how we cap ourselves from creativity because we want to keep an image, or we want to own something that's kind of false.
Right.
So I think just trying new things too, like putting NBA wife in my bio, that's new.
That's
I'm
so
surprised
funny.
you saw it. Just putting my Spotify thing, it's new. Like
Right.
making new playlists, it's new. So I think like tapping into creative things in different ways. Like I never thought I would start the small business of stitching stuff. My mom was like, my mom loves knitting and stuff, and she's like, oh my gosh, Nellie, like, do you realize you did this and you used to hate knitting? I was like, I don't know. So I think it's just combining maybe like passion and what you would like to do for a career. Like I can't believe that there is a career where I get to do what I love.
Right.
So I think it's just like passion mixed with doing.
Right. So you do a lot of things. Like I said, like you're a full-time student, you're about to work full-time at a church, you have your little business, you have all this different stuff. When you do so many things, do you find it hard to kind of like be established in where your identity comes from?
It's funny because I was talking to my counselor about this. I'm in counseling. Come on.
Love counseling.
I know.
I start next week.
Come on. Yeah, I remember I was talking to my counselor, and I'm a very image cautious person. I know this about myself, and I'm aware, so I'm trying to work on it. But she was like, Nellie, why do you think that is? And I was like, well, like in this position, I have to be this way in this position. And she's like, but who are you without your positions? And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was like, we were talking, and I was like, it's so crazy how in our world today, we don't really ask people who they are, we ask them what they do.
Right.
Or if I'm like talking to my friend, I'm like, oh yeah, the youth pastor at MCC is Nate, or whatever. I automatically just said your position.
Right.
And didn't even realize it.
Right.
So I think with identity, when you have so many titles, it's like, I've had to realize that my titles, I can lose them in 5 seconds.
Right.
But I can't lose my identity in Christ in 5 seconds.
That's so good.
It's not that
Wow.
easy. And I think that's what I've realized. Obviously, it's a daily battle, you know?
Right.
Like, I have these titles for a reason. I put in the work. And I
Right.
think, like, our work and our worth, it's just, it's really hard.
Right.
It's really hard because if I'm putting out work and I am getting something back, it's like, oh, then my worth is kind of coming from it, you
Right.
know? Like, with a job, your money's coming in, that kind of,
Right.
you know?
But it's a different kind of worth.
Oh, 100%.
There's a difference between like worldly worth and like getting money. We need to make
Yeah.
money. That's not a bad thing. But there's a difference between like kingdom worth and like worldly worth.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and I think that's why, like, the kingdom worth, it just doesn't, it's not easily going to leave you.
It doesn't change.
It doesn't change, and God doesn't base it off of something that you do, whereas maybe my boss fires me because I made an ugly graphic.
Right.
You know, it's, my titles can change in the world, but they can't change in the kingdom.
That's
and I
so
think
cool.
that's what I've, like, had to learn. It's a hard thing to learn.
Totally.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Because I think you have to, you said it before, like, you can't get your identity from what you do. And I was thinking about that. I literally had this conversation with myself the other day. I didn't have the ability to have it with someone else. And I'm like, I'm not a youth pastor.
Yeah.
Because if I only ever thought of myself as a youth pastor, I would only ever do youth pastor things, and that would only take me so far.
Yeah.
I have to be more than that. I'm a youth pastor because I'm obedient to God, but that's not how God sees me. God sees me as his son. God sees you as his daughter, which just opens up like the wide range of, hey, you can do anything and still be my son or still be my daughter.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I actually had an opportunity to talk with one of our new students that we just got. And I was getting to know him and seeing what he loves. And can I just like brag on our students really quickly?
Come on.
We have
Love
the
'em.
coolest students ever.
Cooler than me. Cooler than anybody I know.
I'm wearing a cardigan
From Old Navy.
from Old Navy. Like, our students are so much cooler than we
Yeah,
are.
100%.
Or at least me, and I'm okay with that. But like, our students are creative,
Yeah.
and they dress super cool,
Yeah.
and they like think about the world and God and friends and all. They think about things from a different perspective, which I love, because I think if we've learned anything through doing like church and let alone a youth group through quarantine, like things have to keep changing. Things have to be you have to be able to pivot and look at things from a new perspective. And I love that, like, I'm challenged by our students to do that. I'm challenged by our students to continue doing new and creative things, like trying out what, and I was talking with a student who, he was telling me like some of his passions with like fashion. Like our students know what's up, okay?
They're amazing.
Right?
Their outfits.
It's so good. And he's telling me how he loves fashion and loves, he was looking for a group of people basically that are relevant, and we started talking about this idea of kind of the idea that like we are not of this world, right? We are from the kingdom of God as we accept Jesus as our Lord and Savior, but we still live in the world.
Yeah.
And so he was telling me, and I asked him the question, I was like, hey, like, what's the difference between liking the things that culture would say are relevant, of dressing cool, of music, and all these different things that aren't bad in themselves? What's the difference between you and maybe what the rest of the world says? And he began to tell me how, at the end of the day, none of those things matter, because he was solid in where his identity came from. Like he's like, the difference between me and everybody else is everybody else views those things as idols, that if they don't dress cool, if they don't have the most relevant music, if they don't have you name it, those are so high on their priority list that that's what their world is about. And to him, the difference was, hey, I like these things, I'm passionate about those things, which is great, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because I know where my worth comes from. And I asked him the question, I said, so when you see creativity and God, how do those connect? And so I want to ask the same question to you. When you're thinking about creativity and God, how does that bridge for you?
When you ask that question, I think of two instances where like creativity and God really just spoke to me. So one of them was recent.
Yeah.
So my brother and my sister-in-law just got a little kitten. His name is Lil Kev. He's really cute. I usually hate cats.
Is his name Kev or Lil Kev?
It's Kevin Nous. Kevin Nous.
Okay.
But Lil Kev,
Lil
he
Kev?
responds better to Lil.
L-I-L?
L-I-L apostrophe.
Got it.
And Lil Kev, he's a really sweet little kitten. I personally don't like cats. I'm more of a dog person.
Good.
But Lil Kev, he's a little kitten. He's gray. He has green eyes. He's really cute.
That's cute.
He's the only cat I like, basically.
Okay.
And Lil Kev likes to lick, which is interesting because I feel like cats usually don't lick. But Lil Kev will just be licking me. Right. And have you ever had a cat lick you?
Do you know their tongue does the backwards thing?
No.
Have you ever seen we'll do this quickly. You ever seen a cat like lick or drink water or milk?
That's what dogs do. Yeah, they go like this and the water goes in here.
What were they thinking? I don't know.
What were they thinking, God?
Yeah, God.
But,
right,
okay, have you ever been licked by a cat?
I have.
Okay, it's rough.
It's really?
It's sandpaper.
I don't remember that.
Sayla, it's sandpaper.
All right.
And Lil Kid was licking me. I was like, dang, why is his tongue so rough? Like dogs' tongues, smooth as a baby's bottom.
Love it.
And I searched it up. I searched it up,
okay.
And I was like, do you know what the purpose behind it is?
Okay. No, I don't.
Okay, you're about to find out.
Okay.
The purpose behind why a cat's tongue is sandpaper is so when they lick themselves, they're literally brushing through knots. They're cleaning themselves and cleaning the debris. So God literally made a cat's tongue a hairbrush.
That's crazy.
And I was just reminded of how creative that is. Who would have thought? Like, I'm just reminded of how detail-oriented God is.
Right.
That he would do that in an animal.
Yeah, that's
that he would
crazy.
give us different things to, like, live, to, like, be alive. Like, I'm just in disbelief. So that was one moment where I was like, God and creativity, like, God is creative.
Right.
Like, his whole persona is creative. He is the creator.
Right, that's good.
And if we all have the image of, we're made in the image of God, we're all creative.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you try to reject that somebody's creative, you're literally rejecting the imago Dei of them. Like, you're rejecting the image of God. So
And imago Dei means?
The image of God.
Great.
Yes, image of God. So that was one instance, and I was like, Lil Kev's tongue, wow.
Lil Kev.
Lil Kev. But the next time, or probably one of the first times I've ever experienced God, ever experienced something spiritual, I was probably 7 or 8, and I was in a car ride with my brother and my dad. And my brother and my dad were arguing, and I was crying in the back seat, and I was like, I feel so alone right now. And I look out the window, and I see like this figure of what I would think Jesus looked like. And I still remember to this day, it's like the first time I ever saw a figure or whatever. And it was just the figure of Jesus in orange, bright orange.
Wow.
And as we were driving, it would just follow. And I was like, oh, Jesus is here.
Yeah.
And what was so detail-oriented about that experience was that it was orange. And orange to me, I think of like safety cones. And I'm like, Jesus was literally, like, he was my safety cone. Like, he was orange. And like, orange is always like, we use it in construction for like, alert, don't, like, we're here, we're present. And I'm just like, it's so crazy how detail-oriented God is in everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's how I think they mesh together. I don't even know if you could say they mesh together. I think they are one, in a sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think I just love the fact that when you create, and you create out of like a confidence in who you are, and who you are is in Christ Jesus, you're actually showing off who God is.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, God can look at a graphic, God can look at all these different things. And I think something I would love for our students to understand that, hey, you can do anything and God can be a part of it.
Yeah.
You can create anything and God's love can be in the stroke, could be in the thing, you know? And I just love how, like, I want our students to be more creative.
Yeah.
I want them to try new things. Like, now is the time. Like, I think, like, I wish I would have started sooner.
Yeah.
I wish I would have just went for it like sooner. So for our students who are like, I don't know, like maybe it's not even being creative, like maybe it's something else, maybe they're on the edge of like not knowing the next thing to do, maybe they want a new hobby, whatever it is, like what's some encouragement you would give to our students just to go for it?
I think one of the main things is don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing. There's countless times where I'm like, wow, this graphic is literally ugly.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't believe I created that,
Yeah.
you know? But it took me to fail to get better.
Yeah.
So I just think like opening your eyes to just a bunch of different things, like whether that be rock climbing
Come
or
on.
like riding a skateboard or
Yeah.
stitching something yourself or making a jewelry box out of wood. Like, I don't know, just like opening yourself to endless ideas. Like, just go on YouTube, you know? Like,
oh man, you can
I
learn
learned everything.
so much.
Yeah, I learned everything I know on YouTube.
Right.
And I think also sometimes I feel like we put a pressure on God to provide all the creativity.
Right.
Like God doesn't just, I wish he did, but he doesn't just give me PNGs of graphics and just in my brain, you know, and I
Right.
just tap it and it's there, you know, like it takes me to do it.
Right.
But I could be influenced by God in everything that I do.
Right.
So it's not easy. It's definitely hard to be creative.
Do you think you become more creative when you spend more time with God?
100%. Like, I was inspired by Lil Kev's tongue, and I just started, doodling.
Right.
Like, so I think being more intentional with seeing God as a creator rather than maybe a God, or maybe seeing God in the context of art could be influential. Like, go outside and look at the leaves and maybe think about why God designed the leaves that way.
Right. They're not just there. Like,
They're
someone
not-
actually
yeah.
made that.
And there's a reason. Like,
Yeah.
wonder. I think wondering and questioning is like helpful. Like, I feel like if you question the way God makes things, you'll be like, oh, I understand. Let me see if I can replicate in a sense, but in a totally different way.
So, as we're closing up, I just want to go back to you being bold and you being creative and you being influential. I think those all connect. Like, it's not by coincidence that you are all of those things, right? You're influential because you have tapped into kind of your creativity and allowed that to be spread a little bit where other people see that and then they want to be creative. But you're creative because you're confident, learning to be confident, because that's not, you never stop comparison is always going to be something we struggle with, but you know how to kind of be confident in who you are. So it's like this line that goes down that being influential, I think most people want to be influential. I think most people want to affect people, hopefully positively, but influence is like the last thing, you know.
Yeah.
You don't start by being influential. You end by being influential.
Yeah.
And then before that, you're influential because you've tapped into some creativity, because you're bold. Mm-hmm. And what is the thing that you are most confident in? Like, what allows you to be all those things? And honestly, you've said it. Mm-hmm. It's where your identity comes from. So, or like, last question, like, where does your identity come from at the end of the day, no matter what?
Mm-hmm. God.
Okay.
Big guy upstairs. Obviously.
Big guy.
Yeah, big guy. Definitely God. And I think it's hard to own that God is where your identity comes from, because it's not really that popular to say, oh, my identity's in God.
Yeah.
Or I'm a child of God. It's not the most popular thing. It's not trending on Twitter, So I think with influence, with who is influencing you, if you want your identity to be in Christ and you want to be more confident in that, then don't spend your time around people who don't even relate to God, or don't even try to have an identity in God. Like, it's kind of like the practical, like, who are you surrounding yourself with? Like, I always hear, like, you're the person, a mixture of the 5 people you spend your most time around. Right. And I'm like, okay, if I'm spending my time with 3 people who identify in Christ and 2 who don't, I'm almost halfway being influenced by not identities in Christ. Totally. So, what was your question again?
No, that was great.
Oh, okay.
I loved it. Okay, we're like ending right now.
Come on.
What would you eat at your last supper? Super quick, like 10, 9, 8, 7, 5, 4, 6, 3, 2, 1.
Steak, potatoes, tacos, ramen, and it's Arabic dessert called kanafe.
That's super good. Nellie, we love you. I know, I had to do it quick. Nellie, we love you so much. We're so thankful for everything you've done. And this was The Last Supper. Come on. We'll see you guys next time.